So you think you know South Africa? The beautiful landscapes, the braais, the vuvuzelas that still haunt the world's dreams? It's a place of incredible resilience, vibrant culture, and, well, some truly next-level corruption. It's almost an art form. Today, we're not just dipping our toes in, we're diving headfirst into the murky waters. We're counting down the top 10 corrupt businesses in South Africa. These aren't just small-time hustles. We're talking about scandals so big they could make a politician blush, which, let's be honest, is a high bar to clear. This isn't just about naming and shaming for fun. The impact of this corruption is devastating. It's the reason the lights go out when you're trying to watch the game. It's why billions of rands meant for schools, hospitals, and roads vanish into thin air, ending up in offshore accounts or funding lifestyles so lavish they make reality TV look modest. This rot eats away at the very fabric of the nation, stealing opportunities from millions of ordinary people who are just trying to get by. It's a betrayal of the trust placed in these institutions, a story that needs to be told, loud and clear. So buckle up. We're going on a journey through a gallery of corporate scandals, political maneuvering, and outright theft that will make your head spin. We're going to connect the dots, follow the money, and expose the schemes that have held the country hostage for far too long. This isn't just a list. It's a call to action, a reminder that we can't look away. It's time to pull back the curtain and see what's really going on. Let's expose the truth. Kicking off our list at number 10 is a company that needs no introduction, mainly because you've probably been sitting in the dark thanks to them. Yes, it's Eskom, the national power utility. Their job is simple: keep the lights on. But somehow, they've turned that into a national game of hide-and-seek with electricity. You'd think providing power would be their main business. But it seems their real specialty is generating scandals. It's like ordering a pizza and they deliver an empty box with a bill for a 5-course meal. That's Eskom. The stories of corruption at Eskom are legendary. We're talking about a level of mismanagement that is almost impressive in its audacity. Think about it. Billions of rands paid for coal that was either substandard or never even delivered. Contracts awarded to companies with no experience but with plenty of connections. The Gupta family, who we'll get to know much better later, basically treated Eskom like their personal ATM. They allegedly influenced board appointments and siphoned off massive amounts of money through dodgy coal contracts. It's a classic tale of state capture, where a public entity meant to serve the people becomes a private piggy bank for the elite. And the impact? It's called load shedding, my friends. A term South Africans know all too well. It's the scheduled blackouts that cripple the economy and frustrate everyone. Small businesses can't operate, students can't study. You can't even microwave your leftovers without consulting a schedule that changes more often than a politician's promises. It's a constant, infuriating reminder of how corruption directly affects everyday life. The lights go out, productivity plummets, and the country's potential is dimmed. One power cut at a time. The scale of the problem is just staggering. We've seen reports from the Zondo Commission detailing how executives allegedly received bribes to approve inflated contracts. Maintenance at power stations was neglected for years. Not because there wasn't money, but because that money was being funneled elsewhere. It's like owning a car, never changing the oil, and then acting surprised when the engine explodes. Except this car is powering an entire nation, and the mechanics have been busy stealing the tires. So, Eskom takes our number 10 spot not just for the money that was stolen, but for the darkness it has plunged the country into, both literally and figuratively. It's a perfect, albeit tragic example of how systemic corruption can bring a nation to its knees, one flickering light bulb at a time. It's a company so broken that when the power is actually on, people are genuinely surprised. That's when you know you have a problem. Coming in at number 9 is a scandal that shook the corporate world to its core. This wasn't about dodgy government tenders, this was a private sector implosion of epic proportions. I'm talking about Steinhoff International. You might remember them as the guys who owned everything from furniture stores in Europe to Pep and Ackermans in South Africa. They were a global retail giant, a South African success story, or so we thought. They were the corporate equivalent of that person on Instagram whose life looks perfect, but behind the scenes, their house is on fire. In December 2017, the curtain was violently ripped back. The CEO, Marcus Juste, resigned abruptly, and the company admitted to accounting irregularities. Now, accounting irregularities is the corporate world's polite way of saying, we basically invented numbers. It's like telling your teacher your dog ate your homework, but in this case the dog ate about 100 billion rand of shareholder value. The share price collapsed by over 90% in a matter of days, wiping out the life savings of pensioners and investors who believed they were putting their money in a blue-chip company. So what happened? In simple terms, it was a massive fraud. For years, Steinhoff had allegedly been cooking its books, creating fictitious transactions and inflating the value of its assets to make the company look far more profitable than it actually was. It was a complex web of off-balance sheet entities and shady deals designed to deceive auditors, investors, and the public. It was a house of cards built on lies, and when one card was pulled, the whole thing came crashing down spectacularly. The fallout was immense. It wasn't just the financial loss, it was the shattering of trust in South Africa's corporate governance. This was supposed to be one of the country's champions on the world stage. Instead, it became a poster child for corporate greed and deception. The scandal triggered investigations in multiple countries, from Germany to the Netherlands, and the legal battles are still ongoing. It's a mess, so complicated that trying to unravel it is like trying to untangle your headphones after they've been in your pocket for a week. Steinhoff earns its spot on this list because it reminds us that corruption isn't just a government problem. The private sector has its own skeletons, and when they come out, they can be just as damaging. It was a wake-up call, a brutal lesson in how quickly fortunes built on deceit can turn to dust, leaving a trail of financial ruin and broken trust in their wake. It's a story of ambition that morphed into a lie of global proportions. At number 8, we have a company whose name became synonymous with bribery in South Africa, Bosasa, later known as African Global Operations. If corruption were an industry, Bosasa would have been a market leader in research and development. Their business model wasn't just about providing services like catering and security to government prisons and facilities, it was about ensuring they got those contracts by any means necessary. And by any means, I mean showering officials with cash, cars, houses, and even designer handbags. The testimony that came out of the Zondo Commission about Bosasa was like something from a gangster movie. We heard about a vault filled with cash, ready to be dished out to influential politicians and government officials. The former COO, Angelo Agrizzi, blew the whistle in spectacular fashion, detailing how the company allegedly paid monthly bribes to secure lucrative long-term government tenders worth billions of rands. They weren't just greasing palms, they were deep-frying the entire system in a vat of corrupt oil. Think about the audacity. They allegedly installed high-end security systems at the homes of ministers for free. They paid for lavish parties and funded political campaigns. This wasn't just a one-off bribe to get a single contract. This was a systematic, long-term investment in corruption. They were cultivating a network of influence, ensuring that no matter who was in power, Bosasa's interests were protected. It was a masterclass in state capture from the inside out, turning public servants into private assets. The impact of this goes far beyond the stolen money. It erodes the very foundation of public procurement. When contracts are awarded based on bribes rather than merit, the taxpayer loses twice. First, the price is often inflated to cover the cost of the bribe. Second, the quality of the service is often subpar because there's no real competition. This means prisoners are getting worse food and security at government buildings is compromised. Also, a few individuals can get rich. It's a betrayal of public trust on an industrial scale. Bosasa is a stark reminder of the symbiotic relationship between corrupt businesses and compromised officials. It shows how a private company can systematically infiltrate and manipulate the state for its own gain. The stories are so brazen, so shameless, that they're almost hard to believe. But they are a crucial part of understanding the depth of South Africa's corruption problem. Bosasa didn't just break the rules, they created a whole new game where the only way to win was to cheat. Now we arrive at number 7, but really, these guys are in a league of their own. They are the final bosses of South African corruption. I'm talking about the Gupta family and their sprawling business empire. For years, the Guptas were just a wealthy family with friends in high places. But it turns out friends in high places meant having the then-president Jacob Zuma on speed dial. Their story isn't just about corruption, it's about state capture, a term that they help make famous worldwide. State capture is when private individuals or companies systematically corrupt a country's decision-making processes to their own advantage, and the Guptas were masters of it. They didn't just bribe officials, they allegedly tried to run the country from their compound in Saxonwold. We heard incredible stories of them offering cabinet positions to politicians in exchange for loyalty and favorable decisions. Imagine that. You go for a meeting and they offer you the job of finance minister as if they're offering you a cup of tea. Their business interests were everywhere: mining, media, technology, and more. And they used their political influence to allegedly steer massive state contracts towards their companies. We already mentioned their involvement with Eskom, but they also had their fingers in pies at Transnet, Denel, and other state-owned enterprises. They would get multi-billion rand contracts, often with the help of officials they had placed in key positions, and then allegedly siphon the money out of the country. It was a well-oiled machine designed for one purpose: to plunder the state's resources. They even had their own media outlets, the New Age newspaper and An 7 television channel, which were propped up by huge government advertising deals and sponsorships from state-owned companies. It was a propaganda wing designed to polish their image and attack their critics. So not only were they allegedly stealing the country's money, but they were also using that same money to tell everyone what a great job they were doing. The nerve is just breathtaking. The Gupta's influence became so pervasive that it triggered a national crisis, leading to mass protests and eventually contributing to the end of Jacob Zuma's presidency. Their story is the ultimate cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked political power and private greed. They flew into South Africa, allegedly hollowed out its institutions, and then fled the country when the heat got too much, leaving a trail of destruction behind. They are the undisputed champions of state capture. Taking the number 6 spot is our national airline, South African Airways. For years, SAA was a source of national pride, its colorful tail fin a symbol of South Africa on runways around the world. But behind the scenes, the airline was flying straight into a storm of debt and corruption. It became less of a functioning airline and more of a flying money pit, kept airborne only by massive government bailouts funded by you, the taxpayer. It's like having a pet that's constantly sick, and instead of taking it to the vet, you just keep giving it bags of cash. The problems at SAA were multifaceted, a deadly cocktail of mismanagement, political interference, and outright corruption. The airline went through a revolving door of CEOs and board members, many of whom were political appointees with little to no aviation experience. This instability created a perfect environment for dodgy deals to flourish. Contracts for everything from catering to aircraft leasing were allegedly awarded under questionable circumstances, often at inflated prices that benefited connected individuals rather than the airline. One of the most infamous figures in the SAA saga is former chairperson Dudu Myeni, a close ally of Jacob Zuma. During her tenure, the airline's financial situation went from bad to catastrophic. She was accused of meddling in operational matters, pushing through questionable deals, and purging anyone who stood in her way. The Zondo Commission heard testimony about how she allegedly tried to force through a disastrous deal that would have benefited a mysterious middleman at the expense of the airline. It was a classic case of personal interests being put before the public good. The cost to the country has been astronomical. Over the years, the government has pumped tens of billions of rands into SAA just to keep it from collapsing completely. That's money that could have been used for hospitals, schools, or social grants. Every bailout was a slap in the face to South Africans, who had to watch their hard-earned tax money being used to prop up a company that was being systematically looted and mismanaged. It was a symbol of national pride that became a symbol of national waste. SAA's story is a tragic one. It shows how a once proud state asset can be driven into the ground by a culture of impunity and corruption. It's a lesson in what happens when political loyalty is valued more than competence, and when oversight is replaced by interference. The airline has since been restructured and partially privatized, but the scars of its corrupt past remain a powerful reminder of the high cost of flying blind. Cracking our top 5 is a story that is both heartbreaking and infuriating. It's the tale of VBS Mutual Bank. VBS wasn't a massive global bank. It was a small, black-owned mutual bank based in Limpopo. It was supposed to be a beacon of hope, a financial institution dedicated to serving rural communities and municipalities that were often overlooked by the big commercial banks. It was a bank for the people. And then, it was looted. Not robbed in a traditional sense with guns and masks, but looted from the inside by the very people entrusted to protect it. The scheme was shockingly simple and brutal. Bank executives and their accomplices allegedly created fake deposits in the system, making it look like the bank had more money than it did. They then used this non-existent money to give themselves massive, fraudulent loans that they never intended to repay. It was a free-for-all. They bought luxury cars, helicopters, and mansions, all with money that was supposed to belong to grannies, small business owners, and municipalities. It was a daylight robbery disguised in spreadsheets and suits. The official report on the collapse of VBS was titled, "The Great Bank Heist," and for good reason. It detailed how over 50 individuals, including bank executives, auditors, and politicians, systematically stole nearly 2 billion rand from the bank. Mayors and municipal officials were allegedly bribed to illegally deposit public money into VBS, money which was then promptly stolen. This meant that municipalities lost hundreds of millions of rands meant for basic services like water and sanitation. The human cost of this collapse was devastating. Elderly people who had put their entire life savings into VBS were left with nothing. Stokvels, community savings clubs, lost everything. The dream of a community-focused bank was shattered, and in its place was a crater of financial ruin and betrayal. The images of desperate depositors queuing outside the closed bank, hoping to get some of their money back, were a powerful and tragic symbol of the real-world impact of this kind of greed. The VBS scandal is a particularly painful one because it preyed on the vulnerable and exploited the hope for black economic empowerment. It showed that corruption has no conscience. The perpetrators didn't just steal money, they stole the trust and aspirations of an entire community. It's a chilling example of how greed can poison even the most promising of ventures, leaving a legacy of poverty and despair. Rolling into our number 4 spot is another state-owned giant, Transnet. Transnet is responsible for South Africa's ports, railways, and pipelines. It's the circulatory system of the country's economy, moving goods from the mines and farms to the rest of the world. But under the shadow of state capture, this vital artery became clogged with corruption. Transnet became a central hub for the Gupta family's looting operations, a freight train of fraud that ran roughshod over procurement laws and, honestly, just basic common sense. The main event at Transnet was a series of massive locomotive procurement deals. The company spent billions of rands buying over 1,000 new locomotives. Sounds good, right? Modernizing the fleet. But the Zondo Commission uncovered a scheme of breathtaking scale. The cost of these locomotives was allegedly massively inflated, with billions of rands in kickbacks being paid to Gupta-linked shell companies. These weren't just commissions, this was a built-in corruption tax on a national infrastructure project. So, how did it work? Well, it was a sophisticated operation. Contracts were awarded to Chinese manufacturers, but with a crucial condition: they had to use specific business development partners or consultants nominated by the Guptas and their associates. These shell companies did no real work but received enormous consulting fees, which were just a laundered form of the kickbacks. The money was then channeled through a complex network of accounts in Dubai and Hong Kong, effectively stealing billions from the South African people. Key executives at Transnet, including CEOs and the CFO, were allegedly deeply complicit in this scheme. They signed off on the inflated prices, ignored warnings from their own treasury departments, and pushed the deals through with incredible speed. In return, they allegedly received millions in bribes. It was a complete capture of the institution's leadership, turning them from guardians of a public asset into facilitators of a grand theft. The very people meant to protect Transnet were the ones opening the doors for the looters. The consequences for Transnet and the South African economy have been severe. The company is now saddled with enormous debt from these overpriced deals. Its operational efficiency has plummeted, with rail lines falling into disrepair and ports becoming congested. This hurts everyone, from miners who can't get their commodities to market, to farmers whose produce rots waiting for transport. Transnet's story is a prime example of how state capture doesn't just steal money, it cripples the very infrastructure a country needs to grow and prosper. Tuning in at number 3 is the South African Broadcasting Corporation, the SABC, the public broadcaster. For decades, the SABC was the voice of the nation, a source of news, education, and entertainment for millions. But it too fell victim to political interference and catastrophic mismanagement, turning into a mouthpiece for the powerful and a hotbed of financial chaos. It's like your favorite TV show suddenly being replaced by a 24/7 broadcast of your weird uncle's political rants, and you're paying for it. The era of Hlaudi Motsoeneng as the SABC's COO is the stuff of legend. Hlaudi, a man who famously didn't even have a high school diploma, ran the SABC like his personal fiefdom. He purged journalists who dared to be critical of the government, implemented a bizarre 90% local music quota that musicians themselves said was unworkable, and paid himself enormous unapproved bonuses. He was a one-man wrecking ball of corporate governance, seemingly untouchable due to his political connections. Under his watch, the SABC's finances went into a nosedive. There were stories of lavish spending, irregular contracts, and a culture of fear and paranoia. The Zondo Commission heard how the New Age, the Gupta-owned newspaper, was paid millions for breakfast briefings that were little more than propaganda events for the ruling elite, broadcast live on the SABC's morning show. The public broadcaster was effectively being used to prop up another arm of the state capture project. This wasn't just about money. The corruption at the SABC had a profound impact on South Africa's democracy. When the public broadcaster stops being an independent source of information and starts censoring news to protect politicians, it starves the public of the truth. It undermines accountability and creates an echo chamber for the powerful. The SABC's sunshine journalism policy, where negative stories about the president were allegedly suppressed, was a direct assault on the principles of a free press. The broadcaster had to be bailed out by the government multiple times, again, with taxpayer money. It lost its most talented staff, and more importantly, it lost the trust of the public. Rebuilding the SABC into a credible, independent institution has been a long and difficult process. Its story is a powerful lesson in how easily a vital public institution can be corrupted when its independence is compromised, turning a public service into a political tool. Pulling into the station at a very close number 2 is another transport entity, the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, or Prasa. If Transnet was the freight train of corruption, Prasa was the passenger train that went completely off the rails. Prasa is responsible for the metro rail commuter trains that millions of working-class South Africans rely on every single day. Its mission is to provide affordable, reliable public transport. Instead, it became a playground for tender fraud and breathtaking incompetence. The signature scandal at Prasa was the tall trains saga. Yes, you heard that right. The company spent billions of rands on new locomotives from Spain, only to discover that they were too tall for the country's railway infrastructure. It's like buying a brand new suit, and then realizing the pants are on your head. It would be funny if it weren't so tragic and wasteful. This single blunder cost the country billions and became a global symbol of South African procurement failure. But the tall trains were just the tip of the iceberg. Investigations by the public protector and forensic auditors uncovered what was described as systemic corruption at Prasa. There was evidence of billions of rands in irregular expenditure, contracts awarded to shell companies, and payments made for services that were never delivered. The place was allegedly being looted from top to bottom. It was a free-for-all, with connected individuals enriching themselves while the rail system crumbled. The consequences for ordinary commuters have been devastating. Trains are constantly delayed or canceled. The infrastructure has been vandalized and stripped for scrap metal, often because of lax security. Another area plagued by corrupt contracts. Stations are derelict and carriages are overcrowded and unsafe. People have lost their jobs because they can't get to work on time. The very people Prasa was created to serve have been its biggest victims. The story of Prasa is one of profound institutional decay. It's what happens when oversight fails completely and a culture of impunity takes root. The former CEO, Lucky Montana, oversaw much of this chaos, and despite mountains of evidence of wrongdoing, accountability has been painfully slow. Prasa stands as a monument to how corruption can destroy a vital public service, leaving millions of the country's poorest citizens stranded. And here we are at number 1 on our list of South Africa's most corrupt businesses. Taking the top spot is the state-owned arms manufacturer Denel. This one is particularly sinister because it involves the defense of the nation. Denel was once a world-class, technologically advanced arms company, a source of pride and strategic independence for South Africa. But it too was captured, hollowed out, and brought to the brink of collapse by the forces of greed and political manipulation. Denel's downfall is inextricably linked to, you guessed it, the Gupta family and their associates. A key moment was the creation of a joint venture called Denel Asia. This was a partnership with a Gupta-linked shell company in Hong Kong that had zero experience in the defense industry. The plan was allegedly to use this entity to channel Denel's business in Asia, with the Gupta associates taking a massive cut. It was a blatant attempt to hijack the company's international marketing arm for personal enrichment. This move, along with the appointment of a compromised board and executive team, sent Denel into a spiral. Talented engineers and scientists left in droves. International partners became wary of doing business with a company tainted by corruption. The company started losing money at an alarming rate, unable to pay salaries or suppliers. A high-tech jewel in the state's crown was being stripped for parts, its intellectual property and reputation left in tatters. The corruption at Denel is part of a longer, darker history of malfeasance in South Africa's defense sector, stretching all the way back to the infamous post-apartheid arms deal of the late 1990s. That deal was plagued by allegations of bribery paid to politicians and officials to influence the procurement of fighter jets and warships. It was the original sin of corruption in the new South Africa, and the rot that started there seems to have found a new home at Denel decades later. Denel takes our top spot because the stakes are so high. This isn't just about trains or electricity, it's about national security. When you corrupt your arms manufacturer, you weaken your country's ability to defend itself. You betray the soldiers who rely on that equipment. You squander decades of investment in high-level skills and technology. The capture of Denel represents the most cynical form of corruption, sacrificing the nation's shield for a pot of gold. It's the ultimate betrayal. So, there you have it, 10 stories of greed, betrayal, and systemic rot. From our lights to our trains, from our banks to our national defense, we've seen how corruption has seeped into the very foundations of South Africa. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, even hopeless, when you see the scale of it all. The numbers are so big they lose meaning, and the schemes are so complex they make your head spin. But looking away is not an option, because the cost of this corruption is paid by ordinary people every single day. It's paid in lost jobs, poor services, and stolen futures. This is why accountability is not just a buzzword, it's everything. It's the only antidote to the poison of corruption. Seeing people being investigated by the Zondo Commission, seeing arrests being made, even if it's slow, is a start. But it's not enough. True accountability means creating a system where this can't happen again. It means strengthening our institutions, demanding transparency from our leaders in both government and business, and protecting the brave whistleblowers who risk everything to expose the truth. It means building a culture where integrity is valued more than a quick buck. So, what can we do? We can stay informed, we can read, watch, and share stories like these. We can support investigative journalism. We can ask tough questions and demand answers. We can vote for people we believe have integrity. It's a long road, and the fight is far from over. But it's a fight worth having. The future of a beautiful, resilient country depends on it. Thanks for watching. Let's keep exposing the truth together.